Holy and living God, we thank you for the gift of technology that allows us to come together and share this meeting together, even when we can't be in person. We pray a blessing over our time, that your spirit would be with us and that we would listen for your whisper. In Christ's holy name, amen. Can you all see it?
Yes, it's up.
All right, great. Take it away, Alexa, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like there's currently 16 attendees, which sounds about right. I don't know if more people said they were planning on coming, but that was about the same size as the other learning trees, I think. So let's get started since we're starting a little bit after 11 anyways. Thank you everyone for attending this learning tree. Again, my name is Alexa. I am the chair of this ad hoc bylaws committee. Also on the council as well. My fellow bylaws committee members are with me. Martha Bulkin, our chair, Carl Schlack, our vice chair, Bruce Luxton, our secretary, and Rosemary Eberhardt, our historian. Pastor Mary, could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. I just wanted to quickly give you folks a recap of what's happened in the last month, or maybe 5 or 6 weeks. A lot has happened. So since the last time we met via virtual learning tree mid-February, we gave you guys a general presentation, and then we showed you the proposed changes that we were originally thinking of. Since then, we've received a lot of email feedback. We've also had phone conversations with some members. We've also had several in-person learning trees at the Winmer campus as well as at the sanctuary. And that brings us to today, yet another virtual learning tree, especially for those people who have not been able to attend in person, or even if you just didn't feel comfortable doing so because of the pandemic. So we thank you for joining us today. And what we plan on doing is we're going to be giving a general presentation about the changes. We're going to specifically look at the most recent changes that we've implemented in the third draft that was just released this past week. I did also want to note, in case you missed it, we've extended, or we've pushed back our special meeting that we'll be voting on these bylaws to April 18th. So hopefully this has just given everyone, lots more opportunity, all the time that everyone is needed to voice their concerns, review the changes, think about them. Yeah, so that's where we're at. And I am now going to hand it over to Rosemary.
May we have the next screen? Aloha Central Union Church members. Mahalo nui loa to each and every one of you for attending the Bylaws Learning Tree, and of course, for being a member of the church. The grand photo you see on the screen consists of the sanctuary, Atherton Chapel, and the Great Lawn, which was put on the Hawaii Historic Register in 2006. This parcel covers 5 acres of the 8.3 acres on the corner of Beretania and Punahou Streets. On the border of Beretania, there is an HVCB warrior sign, the Hawaii Visitors Conventions Bureau sign. So look for it the next time you drive on Beretania. Our church's history is that of uniting and caring. In 1886, when Bethel Union Church was destroyed in a Chinatown fire, Fort Street Church invited the Bethel congregation to merge with them, thus forming Central Union Church in 1887. We will be celebrating the 134th anniversary this coming November. The Portuguese Evangelical Church, which eventually changed its name to Pilgrim Church, was also founded in 1887 with the help of Central Union members. The Pilgrim Church merged with Central Union in 1940. In 1956, Windward United Church of Christ was formed on Kaneohe Bay Drive. It became independent in 1963, and in 2018 merged with Central Union as Central Union Windward. Welcome back, Central Union Windward. In 2002, a small elderly Pohnpeian group worshiping in Hawaii, led by the Reverend Albert Sturgis, an American missionary, expressed an interest in becoming part of Central Union Church. The merge became official in 2003, allowing the Pohnpeian congregation to worship in their own language. In the 134 years of history, Central Union Church has cared for its members and the wider community. In order to meet new and growing demands of the times, its governance has had to keep up and make adjustments faithfully and justly. Historically, this has occurred over 30 times. Some feel this time around, drastic changes were made. What we have done is simply lift one of the articles and a little bit of another in the bylaws and moved it over to form the standing rules, to provide efficiency by reducing layering and duplication. This will be explained further. The committee sincerely asks for your favorable vote. Mahalo, and here is Bruce.
Aloha. Next slide, please, Mary. The old bylaws that we have been operating under since 2008 are a combination of the laws, and in addition to that, there are things in it like the way to form a committee and the number of people that should be on a committee and how many church council members should be on the committee. And so there were a lot of things in what we considered the law that were not necessarily part of the law. So, as Rosemary just said, next slide, please. We have changed it into two documents. The first document is the law itself, the bylaws, and we still have bylaws. The second document we call the standing rules. And inside the standing rules, we have information on committees, and it's very clear to us that we should have information on the committees because we believe that committees are the backbone of a congregational church. And the committees themselves, in order to be congregational, should be open to all the members, which we're very specific about that also. Now, the church council, which is approved by the congregation, can make some decisions about the committees. And let me tell you what decisions the church council can make. Next slide, please. The church council predominantly can approve new committees. Will be the role of the church council. In other words, we can get a new committee without having to come to the church and ask the congregation if the committee will be allowed. However, we expect all the committees to come from the bottoms up. In other words, any member could walk forward and create a committee of the church as long as they were a member of the church and they had a good Christian theme or purpose for creating the committee. Each committee will have a liaison that reports to the church council. And it's very important because early on, people thought that the church council would have the authority to remove a committee if Maybe they didn't like the committee. Well, that's not the case. The church council can only remove a committee of the church that has been inactive and has no members and has been inactive for 1 year. Next slide, please. Okay, the law part. In the bylaws, the first document that I showed you, in the bylaws, there is a section that we removed that said that the associate minister or interim ministers, or in our case, an acting minister, can apply for the position of senior, could not apply for the position in the past. We removed any restrictions that would prevent an interim minister, an associate minister, or an acting senior minister from participating in a search for a senior minister. And so the other thing that we changed is we changed one word on the issue of an interim search committee. The interim search committee used to say, well, the interim search committee was required by the church council. Now the word we changed is that the church council may create an interim minister search committee. It's very important to us to explain to you that there is no change in the requirement for the church council to create a senior minister search committee. It is still very important that they do a thorough search and that they conduct the search so that all people that are eligible apply, and that they do a thorough job of reviewing all the people who apply in order to bring us the best possible candidate. Next slide, please. Other changes that we have made to the laws. There was a requirement that the senior minister have a congregational vote every 4 years. We removed this requirement. We felt that the 4-year review caused a great deal of difficulty in managing the staff. This was presented to us by other ministers, that the 4-year review was a difficulty. And if we want a long-term minister, we expect a long-term minister to lead us in the long term. How are we going to have a long-term minister lead us in the long term if we don't trust them to lead us through time? So in order to do this, we did a couple of things. One is we removed the 4-year, but then we strengthened the ability of the congregation to release a minister by requiring a 50% vote at a designated meeting to terminate a minister that the congregation would decide on that they did not want. That we thought was very important. In addition to that, in the standing rules, we wrote that there is a process for performing an annual review on the senior minister by the church council. So we expect to have the senior minister reviewed. We expect to get to the congregation and allow the congregation to have input in what the senior minister is doing. And these things are very important, but it will not include the 4-year review. Next slide, please. We did create some new positions, one new position. That new position we call the Executive Operations Officer. This person will have oversight and decision-making responsibility for the missional businesses of the church. And that's very important to us. Let me describe what a missional business is. This might be the adult daycare. This might be the preschool. This might be the wedding business. This might be any other business that the church would like to be in that expands our mission and uses the resources of Central Union Church to actively involve the community or the church in what it's doing. And so this position is one where she will assist with permits, with planning, with certifications, with government issues. In addition to that, she will manage the grounds people, and she will seek opportunity to expand the missional businesses of Central Union Church. The other committee that we changed is a real estate committee of the church. The real estate committee of the church will review the potential uses for real estate, and they will become the planning arm for what we do at Central Union Church with our real estate and with our assets. And the idea is that they will develop the assets. They will do whatever they can do to provide funding and into the future, so that as we move out into the future, Central Union will have the money to do the mission work that the senior minister wants us to do. This is important. The two positions kind of go together. The executive operations officer will take some of the responsibility from the senior minister, and that will allow the senior minister to focus, and the real estate committee will work on developing ideas, concepts, and uses of real estate and other assets, because the two biggest assets of the church are our people and our real estate. And as Reverend Dr. George Scott said 3 weeks ago in his sermon, we have to be prepared to use the gifts that we're given. And these clearly are the gifts that we have been given. Next slide, please. Okay, we have encountered a lot of feedback about the things that I just told you. The biggest feedback we got is that the bylaws committee is changing the bylaws in order to railroad Pastor Brandon Duran into the position of senior minister. We want to just push him right up there as our senior minister. You can read it. This is not true. This is not true at all. The next senior minister will be selected by a senior minister search committee. We believe that the senior minister search committee will bring us the best, the finest senior minister for our church in the country or in the world. It is important to us to think that anyone who is qualified can apply. Why would we want to eliminate qualified people from applying for our position as senior minister? Thank you. Next slide. Even if we started a senior minister search right now, this process of selecting a senior minister would take about 2 years. So I think it's important to understand that the senior search committee, if they started work right now, would put us 2 years out in the future at least, and we would expect them, and we have tried to make that clear in the new bylaws, that we expect the senior search committee to dutifully review all applications. There were a few other changes that we made. They're relatively minor, but we changed a lot of words. Our historian, Rosemary Eberhardt, was absolutely insistent that we made things readable and clear, and that we removed as many big legal words as we could to try to make the bylaws as understandable as possible. Next slide, please. Next, thank you. The standing rules, the second document that we talked about, is a document that contains a lot of information on the formation of committees in the church. It also has some general information on staff positions. We believe that, again, as I said earlier, that the committee of the church is the basic building block of a congregational church. And by allowing the church council to form committees, we are adding to that building block. We believe that committees will be quickly and easily formed, and that one member with a good Christian outreach idea can come and create a committee, and we can work with the senior minister, whoever it is at the time, to move the church forward. We believe it's a great change, and we believe it's important to the congregational nature of our church. Next slide. What happened to the ministerial committees? Well, all committees are important to us. First of all, I need to make that clear. It's very important that we have committees. However, the term ministerial committee was not really very well understood. Even by us, it was difficult to understand. It was, when we figured it out, it had some very good pieces to it, but it created an additional layer of management. So we thought we would sort of reduce the levels and create a place in which the council and the committees were closer together. The councils will have the council will have a liaison in the church council for each of the committees. Doesn't mean that they will be on the committee, but they will be a liaison and they will be reporting to the church council so that we can help the committees as they move along and with whatever growth they want to do. Thank you. This is just one other point that I want to bring up. There are two types of committees listed in the standing rules. The first one is the committee of the church, and the other one is the church council committee, church council committees, committees of the church council. By state law, the committees of the church council have to be church council members. We have done our best to make sure that if you wanted to attend a committee of the church council meeting, that you could, unless they are discussing things that are like human resources issues. Those have to be private. But so those are the two types of committees. Right now, we only have two committees of the church council, and most of the committees are committees of the church. Next slide, please. There was a thing called charter in the old bylaws. And what we found through looking at bylaws and talking to people is that the charters were not being used and generally were not even being created. So there were a few committees that had charters, many of them didn't. Those that had charters really weren't using them. So those charter documents created a lot of detail, like this committee has to have 14 members and 7 of them have to be this and 3 of them have to be that. And, you know, they were things that you wouldn't really want to write into your bylaws. And when we looked at it, we thought, well, gee, you know, what if the committee only wants to have 2 or 3 people? Or what if they want to have 30 or 40 people? It's up to the committee to choose. So the new committees will submit a statement of purpose to us. This document explains clearly why the committee wants to exist and what the Christian goals of the committee are. And committees of the church will be open to all members. The only requirement is that the chairperson of the committee of the church be a member of Central Union Church. Next slide, please. Why did we create these bylaws? Well, you know, we looked, why did we do all of this? Well, one of the things that really concerned us, that we burnt out way too many ministers. Our past minister left because he was burned out. We've had, you know, I've been a 30-year member and we've had a number of occasions where ministers have left us. And so we think that the church needs a future that has more flexible bylaws, that does a couple things. Number one, it allows for more flexibility. And number two, it takes some of the decision-making ability off of the senior minister and places some of it on the executive operations officer and a little bit more on the church council, so that we give our senior minister time to do what our senior ministers have been great at, which is to lead us in our Christian goals and in our Christian lives. And we're very concerned, we're very careful to make sure that the committee remains the core of the congregational work that we do. And we'd like to also say that we are creating a committee. We as a church need to use our gifts wisely. The gifts we have been given include this, as Rosemary was saying earlier, and giving us some beautiful history. These gifts include the beautiful sanctuary and the property and the windward property and the manse. And, you know, these are the physical gifts that we have. And if you go back and read through the history of the church, we have been gifted with just magnificent people. So we would like to use all of our resources to move forward into the new future, whether it be 25 years or 50 years or 100 years from now. That's where we're going. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, as I said earlier, here are the benefits. The ministers can focus on leading the church and as they prepare us for our religious journeys. The church council will have continuity and overlap, and the committees of the church will have flexibility to perform the mission of the church. Next slide. And why did we do this? We're all good Christian people. We're all members of the church and have been for a long time. I mean, you know, we've got many accumulated years of church service here. We created these bylaws to help the church. We didn't create it for any other reason. There's no hidden agendas. There's no emotional things that we didn't talk about. I've just given you the presentation of what we thought we were doing. We do believe that we are preparing Central Union Church for a new generation of Christians, and we're preparing the way for a new senior minister to come lead us into a great continued future of Christianity. Thank you. I appreciate your listening, and I'm going to give you now to our chairperson, Martha Balkan.
Thank you, Bruce. So one of our goals throughout this process has been to listen to your feedback, listen to your questions. We have been meeting at least weekly, usually twice a week, a couple of hours each meeting, to really go through and prayerfully and thoughtfully discuss any suggestions or questions that you all had. And so in this third draft, these are really things that have been written by you, the congregation, and we just wanted to go through and let you know how we've responded to some of your changes and suggestions. Next slide, please. And I'm going to ask Carl also to help if there's further information. Carl's going to jump in with me. So in membership under section 2.3, someone had asked why we had taken out the letter of transfer. That would be method to remove someone from membership. We had originally felt it was kind of redundant because there was a thing for resignation of membership written into the bylaws already. But because that question was raised, we reinstated that letter of transfer section so that if someone does write and ask that their membership be transferred to another church, that will be a method for removal from membership. Next slide, please. In other voting rights reserved to members, section 2.5B. I'm sorry, my notes got stuck together in the humidity. So this was subpart 3. Originally, it had said the mortgage or sale of any interest in the real property owned by the church, and it listed at 1660 South Veritania Street. We took out the provision that only specified 1660 South Veritania. So now it reads that any real property owned by the church, period. So that this now covers the Honolulu campus, in addition, the Windward campus and the Manse. That any mortgage or sale of any interest in the real property at those locations would go before the membership. Okay, thank you. Next slide. Under special meetings, section 3.3, we had suggested changing the percent membership that could call a special meeting to 10%. It had originally been at 5% of the membership, excuse me. I know that created a lot of concern on people. We felt like the process that folks could go through to call a special meeting was adequate, but because the congregation was concerned about this, we withdrew that recommendation, and we will keep that language at 5% of the membership can call a special meeting. Okay, next slide.
Martha, can
Yes.
I add something on that same provision? We also reverted back to the existing bylaws in terms of the number of people in the council who you need to get to agree with you to call a special meeting. So the first thing you do is you can talk to the chair of the council, you can talk to the senior minister. Then the bylaws used to require not less than a third of the council members, and we had changed that to a majority, and we're just reverting back to the existing bylaws as well, to a third.
The third, thank you. And then the next provision would be that if a group wanted to get together and propose to call a special meeting, that is back again to 5% of the membership can do so. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Quorum and voting. Right now, our bylaws say 100 members constitute, you cannot have a meeting with less than 100 members of the church. Given this pandemic year, we have looked at that sometimes situations might arise where it might become difficult to do that. We don't know what those might be, but we were trying to maintain flexibility and being able to respond, because if anything this year has taught us is that unforeseen things can happen. But again, this caused a great deal of consternation within the membership. And so we said, okay, we'll keep it at 100, a quorum of 100 members. And so I'm asking you all to please make sure when it's time to come for a vote on these bylaws that we are going to need our quorum of our 100 members to conduct the meeting. So yes, we are maintaining 100 members to have as a quorum of a church membership meeting. Thank you. Next slide, please. In terms of the council, we had looked at what was considered best practice in terms of size of boards and had made a recommendation that the at-large members would be reduced to 3 groups, 2 each, or 6 at-large members. There was concern expressed by the congregation that this would be too small a group to be able to represent our entire congregation. And so we are keeping the at-large members at 9. We've withdrawn that suggestion that we reduce the number of council members. So we will continue with 15 council members. That's the chair, the vice chair, the treasurer, the secretary, and a representative from the diaconate. The diaconate before was deaconess and a deacon represented. Now, the last several years, the diaconate has been meeting as one group as opposed to 2 deacons and deaconess group. They've been meeting as the diaconate, one body. And so they will be represented by one representative on the council. So we will have those 5 officers and the 9 at-large members. And yes, 9 and 5 is 14. The senior minister also serves as a non-voting member of the council, which takes it to 15. So we are not making any changes to the number of council members other than the one representative from the diaconate, because they have been meeting as one group. Okay, thank you. Next slide. We made some changes to the timing of the nominations to the council. So we reinstated the bylaws language that the council would provide the list of nominees to the congregation 45 days prior to the annual meeting. And then if members would like to make additional nominations from the membership, they can do that by providing to the secretary 25 days prior to the annual meeting. If they would like to nominate, I'm going to call it from the floor, but if the congregation wants to bring up a nomination that has not been proposed by the council, they can do that 25 days prior to the annual meeting. And that requires the signature of 40 members that are bringing forth that. That has not changed. Okay, next slide, please. Section 5.1, we have, although this has been our practice, we just stated, we explicitly stated that council meetings are open to all church members who wish to attend. with the exception of certain portions of the meeting. Like, for example, executive sessions, if there's confidential information around personnel matters or so forth, as Bruce mentioned earlier, that is a closed part of the meeting, but for the most part of the meeting would be open to anyone who wishes to attend. As I said, we are already doing that in practice. We just explicitly stated it. Okay, next slide, please. Committees of the council and committees of the church, section 6.1. This is one that we had worked closely with one of our congregation members to make sure that the wording really kept intact the importance of our committees of the church, that they are open to voluntary membership by members of the church. So if somebody wants to serve on our adult learning or in our youth ministry or community ministry or world missions or our mind, body, spirit group, anyone who wants to serve is welcome to membership on one of these committees. If you are not a member of the committee, but you're interested in what's going on and you would just like to attend, that is open as well. We have just, since this third draft went out on the 17th, we have, in consultation again with member of the congregation, we're going to recommend for our final draft an additional change where it says new change, so that meetings of the committees of the council will also be open to those who wish to attend, with the exception, again, of certain portions of the meeting. There will be executive session in the event that there is sensitive confidential information being discussed. We have in there the language that the council may vote to discontinue any committee that's been inactive for 1 year or more. It was never the intent of the bylaws committee that we would go slashing committees that were active and operating from our from the committees that make up our church. As Bruce said, we see this as the very lifeblood of congregationalism. But we did want to look at, what do you do with a committee that no one's interested in working on? It hasn't been active, isn't doing anything. If we've tried to recruit new members and so forth. So, you know, there may come a time where a committee has outlived its purpose and that we would discontinue. But that would only be after the committee has been inactive for a year or more. And again, depending on the circumstances. We had language in section 6.1, I'm sure many of you are familiar with or without cause language. That language was in our bylaws since 2008. It has been in every iteration of our bylaws since. It may have been in prior to 2008, but it certainly has been in our bylaws since 2008. It was nothing that this committee, this bylaws committee tried to do on its own. We just carried it forward. But it caused a lot of concern that we weren't being congregational, that we were being cruel. How could we do such a thing? The intent of that clause is to protect the church from any potential litigation. And so it's legal language that was meant to protect the church. But again, it caused a great deal of concern among the congregation. So we have removed the with or without cause language based on the feelings of the congregation. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. In the Senior Minister Search Committee, we added language that the Senior Minister Search Committee shall conduct a national search that is open to all qualified candidates, and all qualified candidates will be reviewed. We work on our search committees through the UCC National Office, and that opens the search throughout the conference. So it is, we will make sure that it's open to all qualified, and all qualified candidates are reviewed. There was a question about if we took out the language that says a current staff member was able to apply, that if we, or that a current staff member could not apply, that if we took that out, we would be signaling that to that we had an inside candidate and that people would not apply. So we looked at that. you know, any comment that's come to us, we've gone and we've looked at, and we went through and looked at 33 sets of bylaws from UCC churches across the country. The only set of bylaws that contained a provision that current staff members were not allowed to apply was Central Union Church. So we felt like that this would not, in fact, have the effect of signaling to candidates that there was an inside candidate, because this is what folks are doing throughout the country in UCC churches. Okay, next slide, please. In the standing rules, the council creates committees to meet the needs of the church. Committees may be discontinued if they have been active for 1 year or more. That was also in the bylaws. It's repeated in the standing rules. Again, committees of the church are open to voluntary membership, and that they are open to all church members who wish to attend. The new change that we've added since section draft 3 was distributed is that we also included meetings of the council with the same language, open to all church members who wish to attend, with the exception of certain portions of the meeting. Okay, thank you. Next slide. In the Personnel and Pastoral Relations Committee, we added the requirement that at PPRC would conduct periodic reviews of the senior minister. A couple of questions had come in asking about how we would build in feedback so that there is some sort of regular input that we can provide, so that the senior minister will know they're on track, and that we would have that kind of those controls in place. And rather than specifying what that would look like, we just put in the requirement that PPRC would be able to conduct those periodic reviews. We will definitely look at getting input from various members of the congregation and so forth, but we didn't specify exactly how that's going to look, but that it will happen. Thank you. Next slide. The Real Estate Committee, there was a suggestion that we have a member of Admin and Finance Committee sit on the Real Estate Committee, and so we have added that in as well. Next slide. The preschool, The preschool director is going to be nominated, hired, and supervised by the executive operations officer in consultation with the senior minister. Our preschool is one of those entities where there is definitely a spiritual outreach component. It is a ministry of the church. It also falls in this missional business aspect of the church. But we have felt like that position would report to the EOO when we get an EOO in place, but working closely in consultation with the senior minister. Okay, thank you. Next slide. Articles of incorporation. Carl, do you want to talk about how these bylaws and standing rule changes would impact the articles?
Sure, thank you, Martha.
Sure.
The simple issue that would be before us is that the bylaws, just as the standing rules cannot be inconsistent with the bylaws, well, the bylaws cannot be inconsistent with our articles of incorporation. So if we approve the bylaws to restructure the officers, as has already been explained by you and Bruce, and also if we make the changes to the member classes and have just one class of members, we need to make corresponding changes to our articles of incorporation. So what we'll need to do when we vote on the bylaws, we will also need to vote on, if the bylaws pass, that the congregation would approve corresponding changes to the articles. And it's just those two things. It's who the officers are. So we would no longer have the historian and the head usher be officers in the church. And the member classes would just be one class of member.
Okay, next slide, please.
Martha, a question came in earlier. I don't know if you saw it, but the question came in, I believe, when we were talking about 100-member quorum, and this may actually be more specifically in reference to a quorum, or maybe I'm calling a special meeting perhaps. But the question is, how is the number of members derived?
Yeah, we have in our church database the number of members. Currently, we throughout the year it is updated as we have new members join. We have folks that leave. We do have people who may pass away and so are no longer on our rolls. It is a challenge a lot of times if someone moves to the mainland and does not tell us that, well, I started to say does not tell us they're leaving, but sometimes folks move to the mainland and they're still participating as members now through our online things, or they just, Central Union is their home church and that's where they want to maintain their membership. Other times they will have moved, they may be attending other places and they no longer consider themselves a member of Central Union Church, but if they have not notified us of that fact, then we still are carrying them on our rolls. And so keeping that list up to date, we have to periodically go through and try to reach out to people to see if they still want to maintain their membership in the church. But right now it's based off our church membership rolls through our database.
Okay, thank you, Martha. If anyone has other questions, please feel free to use the Q&A button. Should be located at the bottom of your screen. We can also take any questions via the chat function.
Yes.
Okay, something came in via the chat and the member wrote, I noticed the title of the bylaws mentions, quote unquote, Central Union Church of Honolulu, end quote. Do these bylaws also apply to Central Union Church, Windward?
Can I respond to that, Alexa?
Please.
So the documents by which Central Union Church was created, the incorporation documents state Central Union Church of Honolulu. That's the name of the entity. It does apply to Windward. It applies to all of Central Union Church because that is just the legal name of the organization.
Another comment came in through the chat. I'll just read it out loud, although I think everyone can read it too. Baptism is fundamental to church membership. It needs to be required. I wrote to the Bylaws Committee yesterday about this. Yes, I did see that come into my email. I can say we haven't had an opportunity to rediscuss or revisit this again. The last time we met was Friday, 2 days ago, and then this email came in yesterday. We very well may be looking at this topic again. But if anyone else wants to comment, they can.
We are meeting regularly, but anything that's come in since Friday at a Friday afternoon, we have not had a chance to discuss yet. So we did see this, your email yesterday, Ellie. We just haven't met since yesterday. And Margie says, I see the meeting's been recorded. Since I could not find the link, I wonder if the recording might not be useful to be posted. Yes, we can definitely. I know our last webinar we posted in the news section, so I think we can do that as well. And to okay, Alice asked, aloha, Bylaws Committee. Priorities was to clean up the database. How do your proposed revisions to the bylaws address the database, particularly in terms of membership? I think the bylaws look at being the governance document. And so in terms of how the operationally things are put into place, that is more of a thing that we would look at. we define things such as membership and terms of membership and so forth, but the execution of those things are not written into the bylaws.
I'm sorry, I think, Ellie posted another comment right after her first one. And Ellie, yes, that was part of what we received from you yesterday. And as Martha explained, we haven't had a chance to review that yet, but we will. I just wanted to comment on that one.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Margie. Margie said, thank you. We appreciate all of you all for joining in. It's very heartwarming to know the level of commitment and care that folks have for our church and your interest and all the responses that we've gotten. And we are very, very grateful for all your comments and your thought and prayerful concerns of these bylaws as well.
One more question came in the question and answer. Is the executive operations officer automatically a female as expressed in the printout? The answer is no. We're just
We're trying
he
to
or
be,
she.
we're trying to be inclusive in our language. Historically, so many things have been he, that we are trying to say he and she or whoever it might be.
Someone wrote in the chat, the council minutes should be published. Maybe Rosemary can speak to that, but I know that all of our council meeting minutes are recorded. I'm not sure where they go, to be honest, but I was under the impression that members actually could request to look them up and to receive access to them.
If minutes are provided to the archives, we have them on hand for public view, but they must be turned into the archives for it to be on public view. Then usually in April, I collect all of the minutes for the previous year and I mail them to the mainland in Ohio to a binding company. The binding company binds the minutes, sends it back in a book form, which makes it very easy for a researcher or a member to visit the archives and peruse. We also bind the Spire, bulletins, the annual reports. Oops.
Okay.
Sorry, my cuckoo clock is going on. And we also bind preschool minutes, but preschool minutes have been in arrears. Okay, I'm turning off my cuckoo.
Okay, and yeah, and so Debbie, in terms of the minutes, we haven't published those, but what I have done in my Spire article every month is I will take the minutes and I write highlights from the council, and so I will put in information that was discussed at that month's council just in bullet form. So I've tried to get that information out, though it hasn't been the official minutes that have been published. It's drawn from the minutes, just highlights from the council. Thank you, Peggy. And Margie says she believes the council minutes were posted online. Yeah, I will talk with Evie after this meeting and see how we did that before. How would people know whether they wanted to attend the council meeting. Wait, I'm sorry, the chats are going up too fast for me to see. Oh, so Debbie, I think maybe you mean the agenda. So they, how would people know whether they wanted to attend the council meeting? Because the minutes are the after the effect of what has happened. So maybe it's the agenda that we're talking about. And we can certainly look at doing that in the upcoming council year. Okay.
Someone wrote that the church committees are required to write a statement of purpose. Are the council committees required to write their purposes? There very well may be language.
Yes,
they're not new committees, so they already exist. But I think the purposes are already there.
Each committee should have a statement of purpose, whether it's a committee of the council or a committee of the church. Liz asked in the Q&As by saying the preschool director shall be supervised by the EOO. Does that imply we will always have an EOO from now on? Obviously right now we do not have one. This is our intent towards where we want to move. And I'm trying to look at our standing rules, how we have it under staff. So under staff, it says subject to budgetary constraints, leading staff positions of the church and preschool are anticipated to be as follows. But again, it's subject to what we're able to provide at that time.
One question came in asking, what will the process be for voting on the bylaws? Will we be going section by section or all of it in one fell swoop? I can answer that. Our intention is to vote on it in its entirety. But we will be issuing the notice as we're required to.
We did go back and look at how it had been done previously, and that's how it was done in 2008 when we did the restatement of the bylaws.
Any more questions?
Is there a way to make recommendations or suggestions to the nominations committee prior to the list being presented?
Well, that's my job.
Yes.
And I can speak to that. I didn't do that this past time. To be honest, I've never done it that way. I'm not opposed to it. Hold on, sorry, let me organize my thought. More chats are coming in. So it's not my intention to be to guard or to be exclusive. I want to be as inclusive as possible. So my process has been just basically what I've seen in the past as I've been serving on the council. So every time it's time for me to start thinking about looking at nominees, several months prior to the annual meeting, I always ask every single person on the council at the council meetings, you guys have any ideas or suggestions? I'm open to all people. You just send me their names and I'll look at them. So that's always been my process, but it's true. I have never gone beyond the council meeting. I do know that there have been some active church members on the council who have been attending our council meetings, and I thank them for attending and sitting with us, even though they don't have to. So I know that at least those church members would have seen my open invitation. But that's not what I've done these past 2 years. Will I change that going forward? Sure, I'll think about that. And more than anything, I just hope I'm better organized, I guess, for the next round when I am due to nominate candidates to the church.
Alexa, if I could add something, I've been chair of the nominations and governance committee in the past as well. And the process you described is what I've seen done even before I was the chair of that committee. trying to get the word out to the committees of the council so they can pass the word out. But I think it's a good suggestion Peggy has. And I think, in the future, we should look at when nominations and governance, I would be in support, like you've indicated, of having the nominations and governance committee send out a notice to the entire congregation and to ask if you're interested in serving on the council, please let us know.
I do think one of the things that we tried to be very mindful of and cognizant of always is knowing that we have a number of different, a very diverse congregation, and making sure that all different segments are represented from our different groups, our Windward ministry, our Pompeian ministry, as well as all the different services and different committees that make up Central Union Church, so that we get a very wide representation of the different groups that comprise our church. Okay, there was in the chat, Evie asked about administration and finance includes investment budget, stewardship. Would buildings and grounds and real estate be part of administration and finance in some way? Oh, and one from Alice said, I'm relaying a message from Jim and Marianne Bell recommending you change the use of the phrase real estate to campuses in the committee.
So, the response to that would be, we'll certainly look at that, and if that works in connection with how we use the word real estate throughout the document, then we'll see about making that change. Yeah.
And I do think with the real estate, when she asked, could that be part of administration and finance in some way? I mean, we had kind of done it the other way, where administration and finance would have a representative on the real estate committee, but they could be included. That would be kind of automatically included then in the administration and finance. Right? So yes.
Any more questions, comments? Okay, well, thank you everyone for attending. I mean, you've seen our faces so much now, I imagine, these past few weeks. You have our email address. You know how to get in touch with us. Thank you again, and yeah.
Aloha.
Thank you, Mary, you can shut it down now.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week. God bless you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Aloha.